moving on, XDLINX Space Labs, a space technology startup, has raised $7 million in a seed funding round. The round was led by Ashish Kacholia of Lucky Investments, with additional backing from E2MC, Mana Ventures, and a prominent family office. The funding will accelerate XDLINX's mission to revolutionize satellite technology. Joining me now to discuss this further is Rupesh Gandupalli, the co-founder and CEO of XDLINX Space Labs. Rupesh, thank you so much for taking time out and being here with us on Startup Street. First up, take us through what you're currently doing at XDLINX, what's on offer, ready to launch satellite platforms for global space missions, right? So if you could sort of explain this to us in layman terms and give us some use cases.
Yeah, first of all, thanks to CNBC for having me on the show. From the XDLINX point of view, as you mentioned rightly, we are actually offering the satellite platform for global missions. So when we say the satellite platform, primarily today the most challenging part is most of the space infrastructure being the supply chain being procured as an individual component and then make them as a fully functioning bus and then bring in the payloads into the satellites and then launch it for a specific use case, right? But what we are doing XDLINX at XDLINX Space Labs is that we're actually developing a modular and scalable bus platforms ranging between 10 kg to 200 kg class, which we believe it will cover it will address 60% of the overall space economy, what's been projected in next 5 to 6 years. And also along with that, by not just leaving the bus and platform, we're also developing some very niche and critical payloads, which are very much required for bringing any country's national ISR. When I say ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance space, sovereign space capabilities into space, and then help leverage that infrastructure for the surveillance and then bring in the monitoring and surveillance of the individual nations. So the idea is to bring in this fully integrated payload and the bus as a service that actually meets the specific use cases, and also offer the satellite bus platforms for various other commercial applications as well, where we bring in the hosted the payload coming from the customers, and when we integrate and launch. So when I say ready to launch, this will bring down that overall cost as well as primarily the lead times or the time to space basically by 5x. Basically, typically it used to be 2 to 3 years, but
yeah, well, Rupesh, we're running out of time, so if you could be really quick with your answers. You've raised the $7 million. If you could take us through how you plan to spend these funds. Yeah,
so basically, we have actually already have the revenues, and then we also have a good pipeline to actually deliver this mission. So out of that, 1/3 of that, the revenue, the fund we raised is going to be spent towards the operating costs to few quarters, and 1/3 would be towards the working capital for the existing pipeline of the orders, and also 1/3 would be towards the R&D to develop that different other varieties of the payloads that will bring in more future missions.
Right. So you've explained how you plan to spend the funds, but if you could sort of take us through the kind of clients you're currently servicing, what's the demand you're seeing? And you said you have the revenue. So where are your revenues at, and what are the targets for this year?
So yeah, so it's a global. So our play is a global play where two streams. One being the federal, where the governments where can actually leverage our complete satellite service, where they can actually launch for bring in that space capabilities to operate, and then bring in that kind of required surveillance and reconnaissance, and also from a commercial side where a lot of companies are actually offering the data as service Galaxy and other companies where we are actually helping them to actually integrate their payload, which have been developed by them, to bring into the space so that they can operate and then downlink the data and then bring in all the downstream mission analytics and then the value-added services.
Right. And if you could sort of talk to us about Elevation 1, which you claim will feature the world's first miniaturized space-grade band payload, developed and scheduled to launch aboard SpaceX's Transporter 12 mission, right? If you could also tell us what this means for an average viewer.
So basically, E-band. So the Elevation 1 is primarily launching very, very, very first miniaturized in the world space-grade E-band payload. E-band is the frequency which is being targeted for ultra broadband. Basically, today what are the speed rates? What we have is broadband, but actually to actually bring in the higher rates to bring in that ultra broadband capability, E-band is what is the frequency being targeted. In fact, SpaceX is actually going to upgrade their the Starlink program to E-band. So we are actually launching very first space grade qualified E-band payload into space as a technology demonstration. On top of that, we have the long roadmap defined to kind of bring in the E-band driven communication payload, so that we can actually enable multiple service providers globally.
All right, Rupesh, thank you so much for joining us on Startup Street. We're completely out of time, but we wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And with that, it is a wrap on this edition of Startup Street. More news and updates coming up on the other side. Stay tuned.